benvingudes a aquesta nova sessió de la Finestra d'Idees. Avui dediquem la nostra sessió a les eleccions a Alemanya, a les perspectives del nou govern i també a les perspectives que això obre per la Unió Europea. I tenim amb nosaltres a la professora Daniela Schwarzer. La Daniela, ja li donem les gràcies per estar aquí amb nosaltres. Thank you very much, Daniela, for joining us today.
I'm glad to be with you.
Okay. Ella és experta, és membre del Consell de Direcció de la Fundació Bertelsmann, és assessora especialitzada en afers europeus i internacionals, especialment en afers geopolítics i geoeconòmics. Les seves publicacions més recents inclouen un llibre que es diu Krisenheit, que és sobre la crisi on s'aborda la seguretat, l'economia i la cohesió i quin ha de ser el posicionament d'Alemanya. I també fan el call, on analitza el moment de canvi que està experimentant la Unió Europea i Europe's Geopolitical Moment, que també es dedica a la Unió Europea com a actor geopolític en aquest context. Són llibres importants que hem tingut ocasió de comentar en altres moments dels treballs del CETEC i que segurament donaran molt a parlar en els propers mesos perquè el tema és molt present. Farem aquesta entrevista en anglès, durarà al voltant de 60 minuts i després tindrem una mica d'espai per preguntes i respostes i en aquest sentit us recordo que podeu col·locar les vostres preguntes en el xat i que aquesta sessió és gravada, amb la qual cosa podeu recuperar en qualsevol moment els continguts en el nostre canal de YouTube. Without further delay, dear Daniela, thanks again, and we begin our conversation. The first thing I'm going to try to do is to share with you and with the audience a map of the distribution of the vote, because this is interesting. Let me try this. We are not experts in German voting in Spain or in Catalonia, but I can tell you that this is a picture that has been circulating over the WhatsApp groups and non-expert audiences for the last few days. Our impression is that this is the picture of a divided country, where this difference between the east of the west is a bit striking. Although the German Democratic Republic only existed for 41 years and almost 36 have passed since the fall of the Berlin Wall, it looks like the political map almost exactly reflects the former internal border of this divided the Germany that we learned at school when we were children. And also, if we compare the results of 2021 in red with the SPD, we feel that SPD, the socialists, have been replaced with AFD, the far right, more connected to the former Germany. How do you explain this East-West divide? Do you think this is nostalgia, this version, the German version of nostalgia, or the migrant crisis, class differences, economic recession? And I'm stopping the share.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Javier, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. Yes, this map is really impressive. And I can tell you that almost all moderate parties in Germany keep looking at the map and trying to draw the conclusions from what happened. Of course, the CDU, which is the Christian Democratic Party, which was that large black part in Germany's west, they won the elections, but not as strongly as they thought. And what you saw on this map was which party went first with the so-called second vote. There are two votes which we cast in German federal elections. One goes for the candidate in the constituency where you are registered. And the second vote is about the party preference. And then this goes into the regional list of candidates. And the number of seats allocated in parliament is mostly determined by that second vote. So this picture is important because it shows you something about what mattered for the composition of parliament. Because here we saw who went first, which party went first in the constituencies. Now, you asked about Eastern Germany, which was blue on the map. Here, the party most voted for was a far-right party called Alternative for Germany, or as you may see in certain articles, AfD, Alternative für Deutschland. And this party is indeed a far-right party, which wasn't always so, but which started out as an economic liberal party, very strongly liberal, some soft nationalism, I would say, and then over time evolved into a party which now is anti-immigration, nationalistic, xenophobic, and in some regions actually observed by our intelligence services for the allegation of being non-constitutional. So there are procedures underway to investigate that, but the fact that this observation is happening already tells you something about the nature of the party. You asked for the reasons. Is there an East-West divide? I would say yes, and also no. Why no? I mean, yes, because the map obviously shows in Eastern Germany, the far right scored best in most constituencies. But also no, because AfD is on the rise also in Western Germany. Even though the Christian Democrats went first, there are constituencies where this far-right party overtook the Social Democrats. And this is also the aggregate result of our federal elections. The Christian Democrats went first, and then the alternative for Germany, the far right, went second with over 20% of the vote. So we cannot just push this problem to Eastern Germany and say this is where it happens. No, it happens across the country. And this is something that, of course, as I said, all moderate parties are now looking at. Why did they lose voters? What is the offer that makes this far-right party so attractive? And I would say there are several elements. One is clearly a socioeconomic one. AfD became strong in Eastern Germany at a time when there was a growing feeling in that region or those regions of Germany that they were being left behind in terms of economic growth, in terms of people leaving, in terms of infrastructure not being as present, for instance, transportation or hospitals that had to close. So there was this feeling of a crumbling system and of being left behind. That combined in that particular part of Germany, which used to be the German GDR, so Eastern Germany, where the regime did not allow strong, independent churches and other civil society structures that were present, of course, in Western Germany. So when the wall came down and Germany was reunified, there was a long, or there still is, a long period where there is divergence in terms of social fabric and civil society infrastructure. And AfD, the far-right party, very early on recognized this and started to build social structures on a municipal level, which made offers, for instance, to young people and to create youth centers or to be very present in sports associations. And so this party has a deep anchorage. And what we now see is it is spreading more strongly to Western Germany. Let me say just one final thing. AfD is scores well whenever migration issues become strong in the German debate because it has pretty strong and radical positions. And over the past few weeks before the federal elections, there were several incidents where there were attacks committed by people with an immigrant background. These were very much discussed in the media and very much used in the political campaign, and not only by the far right, but also by the Christian Democrats, who took a much harsher tone and who said, we have to act now, we have to immediately change things. And this created an atmosphere where the more radical positions of the far right became more acceptable. This is a phenomenon you can observe across democracies in Europe, that whenever the immigration issue is very present, And whenever the moderate right tries to push those issues as well, usually the far right can benefit. And I would say this also in part explains, the result which we saw, and which definitely puzzles many Germans. As you also suggested in in Spain, you look at the map, you can be sure Germans do so too.
Sure, of course. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, also, of course, no, I understand. There's this more uh, in the void created by also this non-existence of civil organizations, the is taking over, especially in the East. No? But still, it is a bit striking how this is affecting so much more. At least at what we can witness with this map, the social democrats than the traditional CSUs. No, and this is a bit striking. How do you interpret the fact that, because in Spain, for example, more far right, of course, it's appealing for workers in some way, but it normally is a concern of more conservative parties. No? But here you have the impression that the impact is made especially on the social democrats, which have the worst result in modern history.
Yes, that's true. And I think part of the story is that the Social Democrats are being perceived as being very much in the sort of federal political bubble of Berlin, while people who vote, for instance, in structurally weak regions in Western Germany, where, industrial transition maybe didn't work as well as in other regions where there's high unemployment, also a burden because of immigrants that they feel on the municipal level that the resources may not be enough to do enough for integration and so on and so on. This creates certain tensions. And I would say it's both the offer that the far right makes in terms of socio-economic promises, although in my view, they are not fundable and they are pretty unrealistic. And then secondly, on being tougher on immigration, this resonates with voters who used to vote for Social Democrats. And so there are really parts of Western Germany which used to be a very traditional area of the Social Democrats, where they had a very strong tradition, very deep roots in society. People were not even thinking about, but were almost automatically voting Social Democrats because that's what you did. You didn't vote conservative, you didn't vote green, you didn't vote liberal, you absolutely voted Social Democrat. This was tradition, across generations. And this apparently has been broken. And of course, the Social Democrats need to think very hard what a strategy is to reposition the party at a moment in time where also the far left is reorganizing. And that is a phenomenon which we saw in these elections in a very interesting way. The far left is split today. There is one party which is called Die Linke, the left, and this party was for a very long time seen as the left party, which came out of the eastern part of Germany, and which has this historical connection to that part of Germany, and is very often called the party that carries the inheritance of the Socialist Party of the Eastern German part. So, but now they have freed themselves from that legacy. They are organized in a national way, and so present everywhere. And just a short time ago, part of this party split off and became a new movement called Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which is a lady who leads it and who created her own movement. And people were almost sure that she would weaken the left party so much that she would overtake them and they would possibly even disappear from parliament. Now, what happened here was very interesting. The left party started a very strong social media campaign, speaking in particular to young people. and made it into parliament despite the competitor who didn't make it, just below 5%. The left party came in with 8%. And so you have a split far left, which together has about 13%. And that obviously also takes votes away from the Social Democrats. And just to finish off with one observation, both the far right and the far left were very present on media speaking to young people, such as Instagram, such as TikTok, and really strongly campaigned there. And if you look at the young vote, you can see how much this mobilized in campaigns that, were just very adapted to their user habits, to their language, and so on. And the traditional parties of the center, they missed that opportunity.
They missed that, yeah. I've been reading that there's a lot of usage of TikTok and other platforms, both by the extreme left and the extreme right in the recent Germany elections. But for us, it's also striking that this new movement didn't make it to the parliament, because prospects were that Sarah Wagenknecht might take a lot of votes from Die Linke. And if you look up the transfer of votes, there's a lot of votes going to Die Linke from different parties, not only from Social Democrats, but from the Green and also even CSU. A lot of people took shelter on Die Linke, apparently. No?
Yes.
There's one thing that's a bit striking also for the Spanish audience and the Catalan audience is that we are aware that younger people in Europe and in the rest of the world are more attracted to the extremes in a way, no? And this, you just explained this in the German case, and you can also see this here in Spain. Also, there's this divide in gender that you can actually see where younger women tend to be more on the left and younger men tend to be more on the right. This is something that we can witness here. And also, I think that some of the analysis in Germany points out to this fact. No, but there's something a bit surprising, which is the connection with the history of Germany and the Nazi's land of AfD, that for us could be something forbidding or banishing this connection of the young. And we see that AfD is turning, as you said, from a more liberal or radical liberal party to a more traditional, connected with the past, no? And this is not stopping younger people from being interested in this party, which is, I don't know if this is something you could comment upon.
Yes, I'm happy to. So your observation is true, but it's really important to look at who is the young vote for AfD. And you actually see what you also observe for Spain, that the vote is split between men and women. There are more young men, really a lot more young men than young women who decide to vote for AfD. And there are several explanations. And the truth is, of course, that the analysis is still ongoing. And sociologists are now looking into the voting patterns and into the profiles and what motivated them. But one thing is definitely that the campaign, the way it was put, really emphasized certain values, some of them really male values, and then issues, of course, which can apply to everyone, but issues like pride, of getting things done, of, being different, being the opposition that is ready to change. And so the message that AfD put across in their campaign didn't, in particular for the younger voters, didn't necessarily sound extremely conservative, right? It was about getting things done, cleaning things up, being a new force in politics that needs to come in to change. And this notion of activism and getting things done was present. And then there was also, I would say, part of the campaign was also very much identity-based, using national symbols. For instance, if you watch TV on the evening of the election night, at the parties of the different political parties, you would see the AfD room full with Germany flags. So in a way, they seized the national symbols, which are, of course, not left or right, but they are our national flag, right? And that way you can see how they are trying to occupy this German identity space. And I think that also is something that is pretty new in that presence. Now, younger women are probably not that attracted by AfD because of an extremely conservative image of women and of families as well. Although the party leader is a woman, the party stands for a very traditional family. So they actually explicitly say in their party platform, we need to support families, and families are father, mother, children, right? So this is their view. Although the party lead candidate, she is a woman who has a female partner, and they have 2 children, and the partner is of an immigrant background, and they don't live in Germany, but in Switzerland. So there is a total contradiction. And this lead candidate was very present on media. And on the one hand, she conveys this traditional German look and everything, but her actual life is very, very different. And the party doesn't, of course, hide this, but they probably try in that way to service 2 different voter groups with very different understandings of where we are going. So I think young people can project a lot into what this party represents. But if you read the party platform, of course, it is a party with very strong far-right positions, which go really back in time when it comes to concepts of gender, family, and so on.
Interesting. One last question in this first block of the outcome of the election. For us, our tradition is also understanding Germany as a country with a very hot debate, with very strong social movements, and our impression is that for the 16 years of the Merkel government, this was very cooled down. No? So I don't know. I don't know if this we're witnessing a return to more identity and polarization in politics in Germany because of AfD, or we're getting back to normal after Merkel and having a lively political debate as we used to in the 80s and party in the 90s. No? So do you think that maybe Germany is also getting back to normal and having a more vibrant and lively political debate, or no, we are more in a more polarized normal world with these extremes in a polarized conversation with mainstream political parties?
It's very difficult to answer because the question is what normal is these days, right? So what we can definitely observe is after Merkel's tenure, where everything was kind of negotiated, and she very often used the term "there is no alternative" when she presented a solution. And of course, there's always an alternative. And so what she suggested is that it's possible to manage political life in a way that you find the best solution, and then you have to agree because there's no better alternative. And her long tenure, of course, meant there was a lot of continuity, and she did have, I mean, support, of course. If you stay so long, you must have done something right in the view of the voters. And now, are we back to normal? I would say we are in a new phase. It's not back to normal because we have stronger extremes than we used to. If you add up the far left, if you look at the far right, there is a strong group of people now who vote for parties that we can say are on the political margins of the spectrum. So the center is weaker than it used to be. But people worry about that. And that is also something that is new and that is good, but it also speaks to your point. Are we now back to a more heated political debate? Yes, we are, but under new circumstances. What is new now is that people actually take to the street to protest. They protest for democracy. They go to the streets against the far right. So I would say while the political center, at least at this moment, if we look at the European election results and if we look at the federal election results, we have to observe, yes, the political center is weakened. The extremes are stronger. But citizens who care for democracy and who care for a political landscape where you have a heated debate, but you respect fundamental principles of democracy, where you also have respect for each other, where you don't go into belligerent rhetoric or offensive speech. That is what a large group of citizens is worried about today, and they show it. So I would say we are not witnessing a crisis of democracy in Germany at all. We had a very high voter turnout, really, over 80%, 83 something. That is enormous. We have people who go and demonstrate. We have a party leadership or lead candidates who on the election night or the next day said, we lost, I take responsibility, I withdraw from politics. The Green lead candidate did. The Chancellor Scholz, the Social Democrat who stood for his re-election, he didn't get elected. He said he would leave political life. And the head of the Liberal Party, who didn't make it into parliament, but used to be finance minister, he also quit. So I would say there is also a democratic moment here. People take responsibility. There's a renewal. But of course, there is a huge responsibility for those who now will govern, that they listen to those who decided to cast an extremist vote and understand what the grievances are. So there can be moderate politics, but which serve the interests of those who feel left behind in a better way.
Yeah. This is interesting. You are leading us directly to the second part of this conversation, which is connected to the formation of the new government. And here, one obvious question connects with your statement. We are likely to be, or Germany is likely to be governed by a new coalition by CDU-CSU, which is a traditional connection, and the SPD. And this alliance has almost half of the vote in Western Germany, but only pretty much 30% in the East. No? So do you think that there's a risk for a growing feeling of Eastern regions that the federal government is out of touch with their interest and has limited legitimacy if we build this coalition again?
So, of course, the coalition building won't be easy at all. It's two parties, but one of the two parties has two parts, right? The Christian Democrats have Bavaria as their own sister party, the CSU. And now it's interesting to see how the conservative vote actually played out. Indeed, in Germany's East, it wasn't very strong, and the Social Democrats also weren't very strong. Then in Western Germany, the two Christian Democrat parties were strong together, but the Bavarian part was even stronger. So we will see a lot of influence of the CSU in the negotiations, and of course, a situation which is more fragile because the Christian Democrats didn't score that well in Eastern Germany, nor did the Social Democrats, but they still need to look at the way to manage the situation and build a government which is acceptable to all of Germany. But it's not going to be an easy dynamic. And because the Social Democrats are so weak on a national level, they will have to make sure that they defend some of their core positions. Because, as we discussed earlier, there are two parties on the far left who also take votes and who offer an alternative, which is in particular interesting to the young voters, as the case of the Linke shows. And so I think this, the question of how to build a government and leave every party their space so they can turn to their voters and say, we are defending your interests, and at the same time have the message to all Germans, even where none of the parties went first, like in Eastern Germany, that there is a positive message for that region as well. It will be difficult, but that's what they have to do.
I understand. Yeah. Also, there's this. We sense the risk of the new government not being perceived as responding to their interests by the eastern regions, but also by the young. No, it actually will depend on how this coalition is created to respond to their needs. But of course, the parties that form the coalition might be afraid that they lose votes by making arrangements and by coming to new pacts with this mainstream, so that there's a risk that they lose part of their coming voters because of making these, especially the socialists. This can happen. It would be also interesting to look at the prospects for the new government, meaning our impression is that Merz has to make changes, is that he has to impress major break with make a big difference with Olaf Scholz, especially, and also with Angela Merkel herself, which he opposed, or he was had differences or political differences with, or political debates with in a few years ago. And maybe it'll be interesting to look at how the things or the new policies may work at the domestic dimension. Our impression is that CDU is proposing so far more traditional and mainstream economic solution based on the same recipes that have led, in our analysis, to the situation that the country is in today. We feel that the German economy is static and relying, as usual, in a few sectors, car industry, chemical, steel, etc. And the problem would be not only how to make the German economy more competitive, but also how to position yourself better in the long term, and opening up to the 21st century and opening up to new technologies. Do you think this is the trend that we perceive, and we feel that the debate in Germany is about making deep changes in the economy? What is your impression? Do you think that this is also Merz's agenda? Do you think that his policies might be able to do this?
First of all, you're right. There is really a serious debate going on in Germany about the future of our economic model. And we cannot ignore, of course, as Germans, that the fundamental assumptions of that economic model have been were broken or broke away over the past years. For instance, our dependency on cheap Russian energy. That is over. We are now importing more expensive energy and transitioning to green energy, which is produced at home. We see our connection to China far more critically, and there's much more risk management with regards to economic ties with China. Now, the latest is, of course, that our strong economic connection with the United States is becoming more and more difficult by the day, with import tariffs on cars or on steel or whatever. From a German perspective, this is a big problem. Also, speaking about the import dependency side, in terms of technology, we are very dependent, both on Asian procurement, Taiwan, also China, but also from the United States. And if we really enter into an era of economic warfare, which we are partially already in, but it could get worse, the German model will be under more pressure and threat. So, and people, of course, look at alternatives. Where can we go? And what we, I think, can acknowledge on the positive side is how quickly the previous German government managed to get out of Russian energy imports. The percentage of gas and oil import was very high, and the turnaround was managed very quickly at a price, but it was managed. And I think we are still in that phase where radical decisions will need to be made. Energy is one area where the price currently is high for some industries. So there are discussions about let's say, an industry price for energy with a certain subsidy. There are debates about doing more in terms of economic security, so to procure critical minerals, for instance, from other providers than China. And all this is happening. And I think the Merz government will continue to push into that direction. What he will have to do is a lot of investment to create better conditions for the corporate sector to thrive. The Industrial Federation of Germany, which is pretty influential, BDI, for a month now has been publishing analysis of what is lacking. And it's basic things like transport infrastructure, like investment in education, research, innovation. It is about telecoms infrastructure. There's a whole list, and they actually make concrete suggestions how to fund it even. And that is for the next German government maybe one of the biggest challenges, because we don't even only need investment into infrastructure and innovation, research, and these things, but also into defense. So more public spending will happen. And that's where the change will come with the Merz-led government. They will have to agree how to make this possible, because we have a debt brake, which is in our constitution. There will probably not be a parliamentary majority to change the debt brake. You need 2/3 of the votes in both chambers, and Merz may miss that. However, there are other ways to do this. For instance, for defense, he can say there is a security emergency, which arguably we have because there's a war in Ukraine and a threat to fellow EU countries and NATO allies. And so extra budgets can be created in such a situation outside of the ordinary budget. And so we will see change on that. I also think we will see more, as much as policy can do, because part of it is, of course, entrepreneurship and the private sector, hopefully better conditions for everything digitization and technology, because it is obvious we need to not only catch up in the area of technology, but we need to make a leap forward for future technologies. And this is no longer a debate about competitiveness. It's a base of competitiveness, but what we actually also need to do is make sure we have our own technological base because of security concerns and because we have to protect our democracy. And that's not a German issue, it's a European issue. And I really think that the next government can understand this and will very probably go back to a role in Europe where it pushes for this agenda. As we have seen over the past weeks, right now, it's mostly Emmanuel Macron, the French president, pushing with his AI summit he held in Paris, which was a good initiative, attracted a lot of money for the AI sector, but it's not yet a German, French, or truly European endeavor. And in a way, Berlin is missing in that puzzle, and I really hope the next government takes that responsibility on a European scale as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. There's something we'll discuss more in depth in the last section, because and also you're a great expert in this area of European politics. No? But let me ask you a couple of more questions in more domestic terms, because the debate is about investment. We've seen some figures that were analysis, as you said, on critical materials, infrastructure, rail and road, can amount to something like 455 billion euros, which is a lot of money. And of course, you have the debt brake, no? So you mentioned a few ways to circumvent this, but there also may be a risk that tackling with these very important, very sensitive, critical issues still makes social issues less important. And of course, the people who, as you said very rightly before, are being felt left behind, feel even more left behind because of the priorities will cover these areas which are connected to more the survival of the state and the democracy, in a way. So do you sense a risk there, and what can be done to overcome this risk?
Yes, well, there are hard decisions to be made. And that will imply trade-offs. In terms of budget size, defense is a big budget. We need more for education and research. And the social security budget is, of course, also very big. So very often the debate shifts to the question, bread and butter issues or tanks and guns, right? But I think the question really is more complex. There is some space to improve the functioning of the state. Germany is a country that is totally under-digitized. Public services are, ancient, like, probably the standard that other countries had 10 years ago. If you look at those who are most advanced, like Estonia or others, we are far, far away. And while this requires investment over time, it can also save us money and make process more efficient and make it much more attractive for business to be created. If you can do it digitally in half an hour or you do it physically in 2 weeks, that's of course a very different situation. And so I think there is more to look at how we can use the money that there is in a better way, because of course there is a lot of tax revenue in Germany. We are the third largest economy in the world, so there is funding. And it would frankly be detrimental to cut social expenditure very radically. But of course, we can also take a look at what are we actually spending the money for and how. Who are the groups that most need it? Where do we spend money on people who could actually, after some time, go back into active working life, because we have a shortage of labor as well. So I think there will be complex responses to the question. But there will be heated political debates, that's for sure, between the competing objectives. And the other one is, of course, to run higher deficits, at least for some time, because that's what is also from a business perspective pretty normal. You invest and then afterwards you reap the benefits. And this country really has to invest into its own modernization. So we need to spend more to be in a much better place later, and then revenue will also come. And that is why the Christian Democrats, at this moment, they go back and forth between different options, but they do not exclude that we need, at least for some time, a different way to think about our budget. And that can mean essentially 3 things. One would be to change the debt brake, which would be a big constitutional change, which would be difficult to get politically, but possible. Second, to use exemptions to the debt brake, which can also work. And then thirdly, to work with extra budgets, which work in the case of the declaration of an emergency.
Okay.
And I think, given the situation in terms of security, this could be done.
Okay, those are different options. One last question regarding the domestic policies, and we move to Euro politics. We saw that his position on immigration was getting closer to AfD as the political campaign went by. No? I don't know if this is a big issue in Germany, and what do you think are the prospects of this, of the new policies on this issue? What do you think he's going to do as chancellor, if he's going to become chancellor, on the area of immigration?
Yes, so that will be one of the tricky issues in the coalition negotiations, because on the one hand, indeed, the Christian Democrats hardened their position, and the Social Democrats did so a little, but not as far. And the tradition in the Social Democratic Party is much more, let's say, protective, for instance, of the right to asylum, the way refugees or immigrants should be treated, and so on. So there are real differences here between the 2 parties. Now, what AfD has said, AfD has said even harder things. Let me stay with the Christian Democrats. Friedrich Merz said during his electoral campaign that he wants to extend the border controls, which in the Schengen area, so in the European Union, as we are a Schengen area member, can only be a temporary measure. And so he basically said he wants to extend the temporary measures. He wants to limit, for instance, families joining people who have a legal status in Germany. It doesn't mean there can't be any family members coming, but it restricts the number of, or the relationship that is acceptable for for following. There are very strong discussions about what kind of financial and social support should people who have a legal status in Germany get. One measure is to say, they shouldn't get cash because they just send it home, but they should have like a pay card and use that, and they can use it here, but they cannot send it home. There's another idea to integrate people who get a legal status more quickly into the labor market, which definitely makes sense because we also have labor shortage. And generally, the question of those who cannot go into the labor market quickly for whatever reason, what is the actual amount of social support they should get? And it's interesting to see that the comparison between Germany and, for instance, France, if you take in particular immigrants from Ukraine, and you look at the levels and compare them, Germany gives far more. And people are becoming critical of that. And they basically say there's not a general turn against accepting refugees from Ukraine, but there's currently a strong push in the public debate to say, well, if they come, they should work quickly. Because A, we need work, and B, why should we just give them money while they sit here and they are likely to stay because the war is not going to be settled tomorrow. So that is part of the debate. And the other part of the debate is if they can't be integrated into the labor market, maybe the level of support, which right now is equal with a German person who is on social aid, maybe that level can be a little lower. So there's a debate about fairness of treatment, and so on. And there's also more and more comparison about support levels in Europe. Where do they get how much? And people realize that Germany is among those who support most. And so one of the positions that one hears more and more in the debate is, well, that's then also one of the reasons why so many people come to Germany. And so we need to be open, but at the same time not give so much money so they are more incentivized to start working or may go to other countries as well. So the debate is very, full of ideas, full of arguments. The Christian Democrats also push for ideas which, in my view, are very difficult to implement because maybe even not legally acceptable, to treat asylum seekers at the borders or even on external territory, where we see the problems that Italy has with its idea to outsource this to Albania. There's no concept of that kind right now in the Christian Democratic Party, at least as far as I know. It's just an idea which you hear in the German debate. But right now, I think we will definitely see a policy which is more restrictive of who can come into the country. We have a legal and constitutional obligation to keep our right to asylum. So the Social Democrats will defend all measures that are there to ensure this right to asylum, and the Christian Democrats will have to be measured by that principle because it's constitutional. Yes, and then there's, of course, the question of how much support do immigrants get, and I think there will be cuts in that regard.
That will be reduced. Thanks very much. Let us move to the last part of this very interesting conversation with Daniela Schwarzer, and this is more what happens in Europe. And we had a very interesting picture the other day in Munich, which is a landmark of US-Europe relations, and with this awkward and unexpected words by the US Vice President, and the German reaction was interesting and swift. No, and actually you can tell that the new government may be ready to take over or try to take over or try to move Europe in the direction of assuming more responsibilities and functions in the field of defense. No? And do you think this is the push? Is this something that Germany will bring into the European agenda with France, as you were saying, or can we expect the German-French engine to restart in this new period, or how is this going to work?
So first of all, it will be a priority for the next government to do more on defense, and that means more spending, but also really rethink how do we spend money. And there are several dimensions. One is procurement in Germany, and the military sector is not exactly applauded for its efficiency and the best choices of actual products bought. And that is an old story, which will again come out as a topic. Secondly, the question of European spending together, procuring on a European scale, following through on the idea that is now present in the person of the new Commissioner for Defense, that Europe moves towards a stronger European defense sector, which is more integrated, where procurement happens on a European scale, where countries buy more European than maybe American. All these are questions that I think Germany will also play a role in. And then thirdly, there's one element which I think needs to happen, which is not that present, I think, neither in the German nor in the European debate. Most of the time we think about, when we think about Ukraine, we think about spending money to give it to Ukraine, or we think about getting our military material to Ukraine. I think the actual debate we should have is also, those two are important and will stay important because we have to continue supporting Ukraine. But the third thing really is, let's look at the Ukrainian armament industry, which has hugely developed over the past 3 years, where you have new companies producing products that are far more modern than what the traditional sector produces in Germany or France. Maybe not high-tech airplanes, but different kinds of weapons, which Ukrainians produce at a third of the price. And so we may actually move to a situation to our own benefit that we start buying in Ukraine as long as they can produce, but they are also stepping up their capabilities and the industrial capacity to produce. So what does that mean? I think we have to move, and Germany can potentially play a role in that. As we are still struggling with the situation of the war in Ukraine and the necessity that Europe takes more responsibility, we should start thinking much more integrated about Ukraine as part of our security order. We always think about we have to help Ukraine and stabilize Ukraine and defend Ukraine. But actually, Ukraine is a very, very strong defense player too. And it has defended itself against Russia for 3 years now, right? And the question is how, for instance, when Germany, who is a big, big player, moves ahead towards more defense spending, how can this be done in a European way, including also Ukraine in the map of players? And I think that's something where the new government can play a role. You asked for France. There are a number of Franco-German defense industrial projects underway. They have never been easy, and we need acceleration here and much less national idiosyncrasy and protectionism. So this needs to move on. And then also for the Franco-German agenda is the whole question of handling Ukraine together with European partners and providing support for Ukraine, and also what role Europeans together can play within NATO. I think a Franco-German conversation is important on all those issues, but we have a new geopolitical situation where we have to work much more closely with Poland, which is becoming a more relevant defense player with now 4.5% of GDP spent on defense. That's big. And then there's also the UK, who left the EU, yes, but we are in a totally new situation where security and defense cooperation, but also economic partnership needs to be reviewed and deepened. And there's a new chance now for a German chancellor who starts with a strong pro-European commitment, who said on his first day in office, he will fly to Paris and Warsaw who has already working relationships with the Élysée and probably also with other offices of heads in state and government. So preparations are there, and he really has a chance to bring Germany back into a more stronger leadership position or just partner position, because others have taken roles and stepped up, like Poland and like France and like the Baltics and Scandinavians, who are pushing projects. And some of them Germany hasn't joined because we were politically in limbo. So it's not about leading something new only, but it's also joining the good initiatives that others have kicked off.
Very interesting. Actually, your book Final Call is about that a little bit, no? Creating more cohesion and making Europe more proactive and getting the strength to act internally and externally in a more effective and definite way. I don't know. You are telling, of course, your viewpoint is depending on that book and your studies, but I don't know if you could say something else on what you would be the key or the flagship elements that you identify in your research that could help Europe get this greater cohesion and make, one step at a time movement or steps toward greater integration in this internal and external areas.
Yes. So just one word on Final Call. I wrote that book when Trump was president for the first time. And the book is about the question how Europe can stand its ground between the US and China. And somewhere in the book, I have this, thought experiment. What if Russia attacks Ukraine and the relationship between the US and China gets more complicated? Where does Europe go? And how can Europe play its role? Now, of course, we have an even more complicated position because the US has turned in some ways against us. We see economic sanctions, tariffs, and everything. We see a questioning of the security alliance and very fierce criticism of Europeans. So Europe didn't do enough after Trump's first term where we could have learned. And now we are in a really relevant shift of geopolitics. And, it's not an earthquake, it's a tectonic shift of players, alliances, influence zones, and so on. So as Europe, we need to be extremely serious what we do. And my list of priorities, which you asked for, I would say at the moment is at least 4 things. One is the immediate security situation. We are probably right now living one of the most dangerous periods of the last years because Europe is not yet where it can be. And we have a number of weak players, such as Germany at the moment. So we need leadership to come into place and to work even more adamantly. And we have a questioning of the deterrence power of NATO and the Americans for Europe. So this is the context within which we need quick movement by Europeans together within NATO to build a stronger defense pillar. Secondly, we need to work on our economic competitiveness because that is the base for all the things we need to do. And we are, in particular, me as a German, I look at our economic data and we are we have entered into the 3rd year of recession in a row. That is not acceptable. We need to get this turned around. And earlier on, we discussed possible measures. But that's also a European issue because average growth in Europe isn't high enough. Third element, which is linked to the other 2 very closely, is our gap in technological and digital development. That is part of our competitiveness problem, but it's also part of our security problem. If we can't control our digital infrastructure because we have procurement from states with whom we don't share the same values, or companies from states where we don't have the same values and understanding of democracy, data protection, and so on, we cannot effectively defend ourselves in the democratic sphere. So that needs to happen as well. So you see that defense, economic growth, technology, and democracy are extremely closely linked today. And no member state, not even Germany as the largest country of the EU and the third largest economy of the world can solve these problems alone. That's why, for me, the base is the single market. And within that, for some of the initiatives I just mentioned, for instance, in the security sector or in tech, you don't need 27. You can just use those who can move and who can do this quickly and who can work together productively. And that's really my hope, that we now see this new energy coming with a new German leadership of a person who said very clearly during the electoral campaign to what extent he understands, first of all, the threats and challenges we are living, and secondly, that the answer must be European.
Okay, perfect. Very good. Very clear. Thank you very much, Daniela. We've been here for like an hour. We don't want to use too much of you, and we like to move on with the questions that the audience has been sending us. But I'd like to come first because I have a question for you, and I was not thinking of doing this, but yeah, I have a question for you. I'm sure you are familiar with Anne Applebaum's book, The Twilight of Democracy and Parting of Friends. And for those of our listeners who are not, this is, I think, quite a honest expression of a liberal and, someone standing with a Republican and with a Reagan and the group of persons who thought they had won the Cold War. And she is sad and struck by the fact that what she was assuming that would be new liberal regimes are turning toward anti-liberal regimes. No, instead of having more liberal bodies and states, we have this threat in former allies and interesting partners who are turning toward the far. I don't share that feeling because I did not win the Cold War with Reagan, but I was more in the social democrat normal side. But my impression is that 30 years ago, I was personally a researcher in international relations. I'm sure you remember we were discussing the end of NATO as we knew it. We were discussing the new architecture in Europe. We have a lot of acronyms for the new organizations that were supposed to take over and build a new security structure in a new world where Russia would no longer be an enemy. And I have the same feeling of failure. The fact that we did not build to create the security system in time. And now that war is on in the European neighborhood or in Europe, of course, I think it looks like it's too late. And that some people were never interested in that project, that they were always interested in using war or having war as a last resort because they're interested in military alliances or something, that the security system was not, for Europe, was not in the interest of everyone. I don't know if this resonates with you, because my feeling is, I'm not an expert, but I feel a failure here. No, we were not able to give ourselves the system. Maybe we did not, in Europe, we didn't want to spend so much. We relied too much on America. I'm not sure. But I don't know if this question resonates with your viewpoint on this issue.
Yeah, so I think the first observation for me is, again, looking at German politics, because we are, we said we discussed Germany, so I just want to share this observation. The German view has been very long until February 2022, when Russia launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that even if Russia is provoking, is getting more hostile, and so on, you cannot imagine a European security order without Russia. So Russia has to be part of it somehow. And that's what the German policy was built on over the years, also explaining why economic ties grew so close. And there was an illusion, of course, because the idea was that through economic ties and trade, some kind of transformation would be supported in Russia, so that there would be more convergence at the end and a reliable and peaceful partnership. And of course, this illusion was completely destroyed when Russia started the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And since then, the thinking was, I would say, we now have a confrontation of Russia with the Western alliance. But that, of course, included very, very strongly the United States. And now we are in this third phase, I would say, where we say, okay, are we losing the United States in all of this? And then what is our situation? And, you know, looking at the situation as we have it now, I think your sense of, well, we failed to build a stable order, yes, that's true. But is it just our own failure, or is it because our neighbor, Russia, on our continent, decided to start waging wars? You know, given the explanation that Putin gives why he attacks Ukraine, some would say, yes, it's because NATO expanded too much. But actually, he is telling us a different story. He has an expansionist view of Russia. He says, I want to bring Russia back to its old borders of the Soviet Union even. And that is a clear expansionist, warfare-based approach, which we see in Ukraine at the moment, but also interventions in the Republic of Moldova, in hybrid interventions in our own democracies. There's a lot. So yes, the security order didn't hold, but we have to really look at the aggressor's motives and what's happening on a daily basis also within the European Union.
That's good. Not everything is our fault. We also have, there are other responsibilities, so we cannot take responsibility for everything that did not happen, and all the promises of the post-Cold War that were there and did not actually deliver. I agree. Let us move on to the last two questions by our audience, Daniela. And one of the first question would be, what do you think would be the new German position regarding enlargement, especially not only Ukraine, but also the Balkan? We've been witnessing for many years a kind of stalemate where enlargement wasn't a part of the agenda, and this situation may change swiftly, maybe, no? What do you think?
Yes, so Germany has I would say, has continuity in its support for enlargement. And also the last government really worked through questions of what does the EU need to do to be able to bring in maybe even 8 countries. So what if we grow? How can we stay efficient? And I was personally asked to work on this for a Franco-German initiative. So there was always, you know, there was no break in that dynamic. That was, you know, that dynamic was there because of Russia's attack on Ukraine and the question how we can stabilize the accession countries and bring them in quickly, but in a way where we make sure the EU actually gets stronger through enlargement and doesn't get weaker. And this question is still there. Now, whether the new government will make this a top priority, I'm not sure, in particularly not for Ukraine where there's a war. So I think the general understanding will remain that we need to support Ukraine. Friedrich Merz is extremely clear, but that we need a solution to the conflict, or at least some kind of clarity how we can manage even a partial integration into Ukraine. And for that, we need security guarantees, right? And so I think the whole debate which we are having now, what if there is a withdrawal from the US, what role can the Europeans play in terms of supporting Ukraine, or maybe even dealing with a ceasefire, which in my view doesn't mean peace because Russia is still aggressive. But those questions are very closely connected now to the enlargement debate, because we know we can't take in a country with an armed conflict unless, you know, we take in part and have a security framework, because the EU as such can't provide this. There are no tools that the EU has, although it has a solidarity clause in the treaty. And the Western Balkans, I think, there will be continuity in the German position that Germany supports the Western Balkans entry into the EU. However, that it looks very critically on what is happening in a number of candidate countries. This has been the case for Serbia for a while and for other countries as well. And I think that will stay as well. And as we have seen, you know, this is now a forecast. I have no proof, but Friedrich Merz has been more outspoken on some issues, like our relationship with the US, than the previous government. So I could imagine that maybe on enlargement and what it takes to get into the EU, he could also be clearer with regards to expectations to the candidate countries.
Mhm. Very good. One last question, more general, and this is related to the AFD and there's transatlantic connections. We see a lot of activity between the Trump movement, but also Steve Bannon before, and the people working for the far rights, and they're very active in Europe. Now they're active also at the official level because it's a government supporting a different outcome of the election in a ally country, which is very surprising. No? But do you think this is having an impact today on AFD's prospects and realities? Do you think that this connection makes a difference, or this is something not very significant in the German context?
So, of course, for Germans, it was shocking to see to what extent Americans intervened in our electoral campaign in favor of the far right. And this was not just Elon Musk interviewing the lead candidate of the far right party AfD on X, but it was also J.D. Vance, the vice president, speaking at the Munich Security Conference and basically saying, democracy is at stake here because you control disinformation. This is not acceptable. And then he kind of went on and recommended, that voters look at AfD. This is pretty unseen in that way, to use such a platform like the Munich Security Conference for such a blunt intervention for a party which is under scrutiny for its potentially unconstitutional basic positions. So I would say in terms of effect, there is now in Germany a even more sober view about what the US are today, given those things. But in terms of did it help the leader of the far right? I was worried that after Alice Weidel's appearance on X, which Elon Musk really very broadly advertised and tried to spread and got her a huge followership, opinion polls didn't react in her favor.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see. I would say people are totally split. Maybe it motivated some more to go for her, but it definitely also turned away others because this was just going too far in terms of interventionism. But of course, there is a big worry that also more informally, those connections with people around Trump can be used by AfD to leverage their own role, to leverage their own position, maybe to copy the way the Trump camp is campaigning and all of these things. We already see patterns, but right now we can't say that Elon Musk or anyone else made her success in the German elections. The opinion polls of AfD were pretty stable for quite some weeks, and he couldn't push her up more, which I'm very glad for.
I know, yeah, me too. No, I think there's a limit to what nationalist politics can do in terms of transnational alliances. No, you also see that in Canada, the prospects for the Liberal Party are better because of the reaction to this Trump aggressive stand. No? So I think there's, of course, you can connect to like-minded parties all over the world, but eventually your position is based on your identity as a nation, and this has a limit on the kind of of the solidarity that you can establish with other parties. No, that would be our last question, Daniela. And
Thank you very much.
Extremely interesting to share these minutes with you. I hope it was. I don't think it was interesting for you, but also our questions show you how we see the situation there from our own point of view. So,
and that was indeed very interesting. I thank you so much, Javier.
Okay, it's been a pleasure. So thanks very much for being here with us. Maybe this should not be the last time we connect and discuss these very interesting issues. I think that the topic of European identity and defense is going to be very important in the next few years. So it will be our pleasure to continue this conversation in the future. So thanks very much, Daniela.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I per a la resta de l'audiència, moltes gràcies. Ens veiem d'aquí al proper mes, no? Amb una nova sessió de la finestra d'idees. Sabeu que teniu aquesta gravació guardada a YouTube, de manera que la podeu mirar quan vulgueu. Moltes gràcies per la vostra atenció i per les vostres preguntes i fins aviat. Okay. Ja estem. We're done.
T'ha anat ràpid,
Sí, totalment. Jo pensava que podríem parlar un moment. No,